Hello, my name is Torange Yeghiazarian. I'm the founding artistic director of Golden Thread Productions. Golden Thread is the first American theater company focused on the Middle East. We're based in San Francisco and we've been around for 25 years. I started Golden Thread Productions right out of San Francisco State. I was finishing my master's program, and for my graduate thesis I could either write a thesis or direct a show. And silly me, I thought that directing a show would be easier. And it was important to me to direct the show, produce it outside of the theater department, and to do it under a company name. So the show that I was working on was an adaptation of Lysistrata. So I was reading a lot of Greek mythology, and I came upon the story of Ariadne, where there's this labyrinth and there's a monster at the end of the labyrinth, and everyone who tries to kill the monster gets lost in the labyrinth. And Ariadne falls in love with Theseus and gives him a ball of golden thread so he can find his way out of the labyrinth. And that really inspired me in the way theater helps me find my way in life and navigate this labyrinth. I think Golden Thread is important because we're an artistic home for artists of Middle Eastern heritage who often are not welcomed elsewhere, as well as artists who want to tackle the Middle East as their subject for their play, but need a space where they can be supported with culturally informed and competent information. Here at Golden Thread, we change the narrative. We produce alternative perspectives. We support Middle Eastern artists to tell our stories in our own words. I think in the beginning I was very naive about what it takes to run and sustain an arts organization. My focus was entirely on creating the artwork and building a community around that. The operational aspects of it, I still knew very little about the granting process and what it takes to really sustain a company over time. In the beginning, I kept planning season after season, 3 productions every season, and then one season we would have enough money and we could produce a full season, and then the next season we would have no money and we were like, what are we doing? So consistency, I think, was lacking. But artistically and in terms of the vision for the company, I think from the beginning, it's been the same. From the beginning, we had this vision of an umbrella definition of Middle East. I wanted to bring all of our communities together and amplify our voices and make us stronger and more visible, and also create a space where we could learn from each other. It's easy to sort of fall into this idea of, oh, I'm the only one experiencing this, I'm the only immigrant community. By bringing all of us together, then we realize that we share many experiences and we can help each other and be stronger. So that vision was always part of Golden Thread, and I think part of that is informed by my own upbringing, growing up in a mixed religion family, Muslim, Christian, and also being exposed to a lot of different kinds of people. My family was very inclusive and very hospitable to artists. So artists from outside of Iran, for example, would come and perform at my parents' nightclub. And I think from an early age, I really appreciated cultural diversity and all that we can learn from each other and that kind of artistic exchange that can happen. My parents had a nightclub. I don't know, my parents' story is way better than my story. Yeah, so my parents opened one of the earliest nightclubs in Tehran, Iran. That's where I was born. My mom was a film actress in the 50s and 60s in Iran, and quite famous. She was one of the first film stars in Iran. Together with my dad, they opened this nightclub that was, I think, either the first or one of the very first places that actually had live music. And they played what they called jazz music, which is what they refer to like rock and roll and R&B and all of it together. So there was a band called the Black Cats in that nightclub and had a singer, Farhad, who sang just like Ray Charles. So they played all these Ray Charles songs and the Beatles and Sam Cooke. And so I grew up with this music in my dad's nightclub. And it was very inspiring. Golden Thread is all about community, right? From the beginning, the idea was to build a community. And it wasn't easy because, you know, the term Middle East is a problematic term. It comes with all this colonial baggage. So our activist friends rejected that term, and our less activist friends identified more along national identity lines. So bringing everyone together and getting agreement that as a matter of convenience, we would all work under this umbrella of the Middle East, the same way that there's an Asian American theater community, there's a Latinx theater community. Those were our models. So it wasn't easy to bring everyone together, but over the years, I think we've done a great job of building this community. And one of the reasons I think is that we're very open to everyone. I say if you're brave enough to self-identify as Middle Eastern, then you have a place at Golden Thread, right? I don't check your birth certificate. I know that, you know, for me, theater's been a savior. If I didn't have this outlet, I don't know what I would do. Like during the war years when US was attacking Iraq and that was on the news, like if I didn't have Golden Thread, I don't know what I would have done, how I would have survived those years. So to have community, to be able to support each other through those difficult times, and also to celebrate and bring joy to each other, I mean, I think that's priceless. So if Golden Thread wasn't around, those things would not be here. Unfortunately, there aren't many other theater companies in the US, even till now, that produce this kind of work. I would say in terms of, you know, Golden Thread's journey as a company, you know, in the first few years, we were trying to just get our bearing and figure out who we are, develop a mission statement, develop a vision statement, figure out how to plan, how to sustain ourselves. Then when 9/11 happened, suddenly we became very visible nationally. Right, I got a call from the New York Times asking for my opinion on the attacks, and when I said, well, the US built the Taliban, and this is what comes out of that, the journalist was very angry at me. But that in a way encapsulates the challenge that we face at Golden Thread, because we tell these political stories from our perspective, and our perspective is very different from the dominant American narrative. And particularly after 9/11, we continuously produced plays that questioned US policy in the Middle East. We produced plays by Iraqi writers when Iraq was being invaded. We produced plays by Afghan writers. We in fact hosted an Afghan music performance the opening night of Reorient in 2001. So as the bombs were falling on Afghanistan, this group was performing in San Francisco. They said, but the US is invading and they're blaming us for 9/11. And I said, do you believe that you're to blame for 9/11? He said, of course not. I said, then come play and talk to our people about it. I mean, sometimes we seemed so anti-American that some audience members actually took issue with it. But the thing that is sometimes difficult to get across is that our perspective is very narrow in this country. I mean, we live a very insular life. Even though we are this huge country with a huge global reach, our knowledge of other countries is minuscule, yet we invade them. And that drives me insane. right? People don't realize that when they're voting for a president, they're not just voting for domestic policy, they're also voting for foreign policy. I remember in 2009, Reorient Festival, which is an evening of short plays. I curate it so that the plays are in dialogue with each other. So we might have a Palestinian play in the same evening as we have an Israeli play, which means the audience is made up of both Palestinians and Israelis, among other people. So in the audience, we had members of a SWAT Arabic music ensemble. We had Moti Lerner, the award-winning Israeli playwright, whose play we were producing. And because Moti was there, we had the Israeli consulate or associate consulate in the house as well. So during the post-play conversation, Moti spoke about his fears for Israel. He lives in Israel. And he spoke about being afraid that if Israel's policy towards Palestinians continues in the same vein, that Israel will not continue to be here for much longer. Then the consulate stood up and said that he understands that there's certainly criticism that can be made in terms of Israeli government's policy, but there are so many things that he loves about his country. And then someone from Aswat stood up and said, it's a great privilege to be able to love your country and appreciate those things. I wish it wasn't at the price of me being able to do the same. And I don't know that that can happen anywhere else. The production that really stands out as a production that embodies everything that Golden Thread is about is Oh My Sweet Land, which is a one-woman show performed in kitchens. The play itself was based on interviews with Syrian refugees and involved live cooking. We partnered with International Rescue Committee to bring volunteers from that organization to talk to our audience about the Syrian refugee crisis, and also the performances, because they were in people's homes or in community dining spaces. The performances were followed by food sharing. So we actually hired a recently resettled Syrian refugee to cater for us. So we shared that with our audience while we were talking about what's happening in Syria. So the artistic quality of the show itself, Nora's performance was spectacular, but her ability to really pull back from pity, it was really remarkable, because it's easy to fall into that trap when you're telling Middle Eastern stories, right? Oh, those poor people. But our intention in this production, and in most productions that we do, is to actually choose a personal story that really draws the audience in, which we did with food, right? So everyone has this experience of being a child sitting in the kitchen while your parent or your aunt is telling you a story. And that was what this performance was evoking for people. And they were just pulled in. And they didn't perceive the story as somebody else's story that's irrelevant to them. They actually received it as their own story, which is huge, right? And so the community conversation that followed, we went to many different kinds of places, but universally all of them commented on how sitting in this kitchen really took them back to their childhood, really removed all their defenses so that they received this story in a way that was very personal and very moving. And I consider that an artistic triumph. I don't know that it's the project that I'm most proud of, but it's definitely one that was very personal for me, and that's Isfahan Blues, which is a play inspired by my parents' nightclub in Tehran, and the fact that the same year that they opened that nightclub is the same year that Duke Ellington Orchestra toured in Iran. Isfahan Blues imagines a chance meeting between a musician from Duke Ellington's orchestra at Kuchini, at my parents' nightclub, with a movie star who's running the club, much like my mother. And the beauty of it was that my mother collaborated with me in developing this story. She informed a lot of the details of it. I also used it to dig up some family secrets. And it was a beautiful collaboration with the African American Shakespeare Company. It was an opportunity to bring jazz lovers and Iranians together and tell a story of like this shared piece of history that really not many people know about, which is Duke Ellington's tour to Iran. And also how the civil rights movement in the US inspired so many people elsewhere in the world. I think drawing those parallels really brings our communities together. And I was very proud of the fact that our audience was 50-50 Iranian and African American. When we did have special events and could talk to our audience, I think there was really overwhelming appreciation for that story. And for me, that production is really meaningful because 2 years later, my mom passed away. So it's my final project with her. She was involved with Golden Thread from our first production until then. So it really means a lot to me. I can say that my challenge personally is that I have a hard time starting small. My vision is expansive, and I just want to do all of it now because they're interrelated. They support each other, and I see how they support each other. So sometimes it's frustrating when you have to start small or you have to be practical. Like, I'm not a practical person. I'm gonna miss the people the most. I think, like I said, we've built a community, and even though this past year we haven't really been together in the same room, we are connected, we are Zooming, all of us. And I think, Golden Thread is, yes, we're a theater company, yes, we're professional, but we operate like a family. And we support each other through ups and downs, and sort of seeing people through difficulties in their lives and then their growth and their triumphs. I think I'm gonna miss that. I'm gonna miss the thing that I complain the most about, which is putting up with actors. Putting up with playwrights, putting up with actors. But I love doing it. To be honest, I really love doing it, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of feeling like I'm helping someone be a better artist. I'm gonna be gone, so I wish you all well. I wish you all success. I wish you courage artistically. Keep taking risks. Don't let anybody bully you, including producers. And please know that Golden Thread will always be your home.